without further ado, I would like to let our speakers introduce themselves, but we are going to be talking about comics journalism tonight. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, everyone. My name is Joyce. I'm the creative director and co-founder of Symbolia magazine, and I'm here with Leyh.
I did a comic for, I think, the second issue of Symbolia, and I've done a couple covers, and then I do a lot of comics just that I put online and have published. So, but I've had one with Symbolia so far.
Tonight I'm gonna talk about the creation of Symbolia and comics journalism and why we decided to publish our magazine all digitally, and why this is such an exciting time to be publishing comics, which I'm sure a lot of you already know about. And after that, Kat's going to talk about her, talk about working with Symbolia, her process, and what it's like to be such a boss cartoonist, if we're lucky. So some context. Symbolia is a comics journalism magazine that Aaron Polgreen and I co-founded in 2012. Early in the year, Aaron secured grant funding for the Symbolia's first year and brought me on to help her get the project going. I'm a cartoonist myself, but most of my paying work is with illustration and design, and my part-time job is doing computer and software support at a local college for art and design students. So I was really excited about the way Symbolia intended to elevate the comics medium at large, and I was also really excited about the interactive possibilities for Symbolia in a digital space. This is Aaron and I high-fiving at Symbolia's launch party in December after 9 months of working together to get our preview issue off the ground. And we've published 5 issues since then, so we've been bi-monthly for the last 9 months. So let's see. Comics journalism is not a new thing. Joe Sacco, who's frequently credited as popularizing the medium, has been publishing investigative journalism told through comics since the late 80s, early 90s. He's published books on conflicts in the Middle East and elsewhere that are really powerful, and frankly, they're powerful in a way that written reporting can't be. Comics have the opportunity to go where you can't take a recording device, or portray something that happened so fast it couldn't be recorded. And they can also help to humanize complicated news stories by giving you like a point of entry. We're starting to enter an era in reporting and publishing where comics journalism is getting a whole lot of play as a valuable news format. We're seeing magazines like Savor publishing comics articles. News sites like Grist are hiring cartoonists to cover some of their material. And Symbolia recently started working with Al Jazeera America to co-produce content for their site. And so, it's bringing comics as a form of storytelling to all of these people that, wouldn't have had that access point otherwise. This story by the Illustrated Press, a comics journalism duo here in Chicago called Wedlock, was the first piece of comics journalism that I came across organically. This story was about this couple that got married at the Cook County Jail because one of them was incarcerated. And so they interviewed this couple and talked about the challenges of marrying your partner when they are in jail, and about what that experience is like. And I ran across it on Gaper's Block, and I was really floored to be seeing comics on a news site. This is really a really exciting time for the news. They get to start publishing comics that aren't just syndicated 4-panel gags at the back of the paper. And they are starting to learn things that you all and I already know, that comics are an awesome method for storytelling, and that comics aren't just for jokes or superheroes. Jokes and superheroes are great, but they tend to really hog the comic spotlight. And it helps comics become accessible to a larger audience. And this is happening right now, and it's really great for furthering the comics medium in all of its iterations. It's not happening as fast as I wish it was. Unfortunately, you can't really read that comic, which is too bad because it's really funny. But it's the artist is doodlebuggy.tumblr.com. Unfortunately, we're living with an economy right now that's rapidly devaluing the work of illustrators and writers and other creative professionals. You may recall a certain local paper fired all of its photography staff and are now having the reporters shoot photos on iPhones. Sadly, that's reflective of something that's been going on in the illustration industry for decades. In-house illustrators are rapidly becoming mythological, and lots of mainstream publications aren't willing to go back to paying illustrators a living wage for a whole bunch of reasons that I'm not even going to get into. But this isn't because people don't like illustration, and in fact, comics are increasing in popularity and exposure, but they're just not profitable enough to be getting the attention of these major news outlets. So Aaron and I started publishing Symbolia because we both wanted to create a new space where we could put great comics journalism on display and introduce new people to it. The thing about Symbolia that excites me the most is the opportunity to put more kinds of comics in people's hands so that people can experience a broader range and see that it's a method of storytelling and not a genre. Our grant funding allowed us to invest in startup equipment and pay for the costs of creating our app with Apple and to get us off the ground and to put work in front of the new audience. Grant funding also allows us to pay all of our contributors. It was really important to us that we be able to pay Symbolia's contributors for their work. Since we have the funding right now, we want to invest in the medium and help elevate that career. Although Aaron and I earn a journalist and a cartoonist respectively, we don't write or draw the stories in Symbolia. Symbolia is meant to be a publication that creates a place for publishing all kinds of comics journalism. Leyh, who's here, is one of our contributors. She did the story in the middle. And we also work with folks like Sarah Glidden, Matt Bors, Andy Warner has a drawing right here. This is a giant insect penis at very high resolution. It's very beautiful. Lucy Bellwood did a story for us in our issue before last, and we just have had the opportunity to work with tons of people that are making nonfiction comics that I never would have met otherwise, and that's really exciting too. Part of our process is Aaron and I select a theme for each issue and then assign out stories that fit into that theme. And then we kind of start to fall into our separate roles as editor and creative director. My job as creative director is to make sure the overall creative vision of the publication is getting through to the reader. This includes keeping it easy to navigate the magazine, making sure things are legible and read correctly, and that it's accessible so people can open it up and know where to look and how to read it. It also means using the look of the magazine to inspire a mood or a feeling in the reader. My job is to curate the viewing experience so it matches the rest of the reading experience and make sure nothing gets lost in translation. This involves participating in the visual aspect of the editing process, creating house art that matches the tone of the magazine at large, and putting everything together in a cohesive way. The aesthetic of Symbolia comes largely from my love affair with the good old-fashioned paper books. Something that is a little difficult about working in the digital medium is that it makes everything feel very flat and kind of insubstantial. And it also, digital media kind of has the feeling of something that you read quickly while your boss isn't looking and then close really fast before they walk by. So I really wanted to reference the experience of printing, even though it's unrelated in every way except that it's another form of publication. Let's see. The paper textures, the hand-drawn dividers and icons, the watercolor motifs, and the other organic aspects are all things that I made traditionally and transferred to the digital space to assemble the magazine at large. I'm really interested in the visual dissonance that comes with melding traditional and digital practices. Digital media can sometimes feel kind of cold, and so we try to ground Symbolia by referencing the look of traditional media. This overall style for Symbolia also works well with our contributor aesthetic. A lot of our contributors have processes and workflows that utilize both traditional and digital media, or they use one to explore the aesthetic of the other. Bob Dynamite, who did the top drawing here, works mostly traditionally and then uses Photoshop effects to imitate offset printing, which is something that I hadn't seen, that had never been submitted to me before, and it looks really neat. It's kind of hard to tell on this screen, but it's easier to see in the actual magazine, but it looks really cool. And then Kat works entirely digitally, but her work looks and feels very organic. This is more work by Kat down here. We as this generation of illustrators and writers come from a long tradition of physically making things, and I'm sure a lot of us were at least in part classically trained, so it's unsurprising that that tradition influences our digital work as well. We also wanted to use the opportunity to try something new with the medium. Digital publishing is rapidly changing right now. There are new platforms and capabilities all the time. This is at a time when the publishing industry at large is having some real troubles keeping readers and advertisers in looking at their magazines. And that's not to say that digital publishing is exempt either. We released Symbolia on the same day that the Daily, the first tablet exclusive publication, shut its doors. The internet was all a bustle the day. They were like, didn't these fools learn anything from the Daily? We were like, well, they didn't inform us ahead of time, so no. But, so at the same time where people were talking about how digital is not going to work and no one's ever going to succeed at this, they were also saying, look at this new thing that is totally digital and different. There are no tried and true ways to navigate this ever-changing landscape, so we thought and continue to think about how we can push the medium. We were really interested in exploring how other kinds of media can inform comics making. As an interactive publication, Symbolia includes audio, video, animation, movable layers, and other things that the reader can, other ways that the reader can change and interact with the article. One example is we've done 2 stories now about musical groups. Amanaz, which is a Zambian psych rock band, and ICP, which is the Insane Clown Posse. But we were able to include sound clips in both of those articles, and it's really neat to be producing a comic about a band and then to be able to share their music accompanying those illustrations. Because we were so interested in the, here's some juggalos now. This is ICP, they're not juggalos. I'm not sure actually how that works. But because we were so interested in the interactive aspect, we ended up choosing a platform called Mag Plus to put our iPad app together. Mag Plus integrates with InDesign, so you design your publication in InDesign and then export it out to create the app version. The main reason that we chose it was because it had the widest range of capabilities, and also the easiest point of access, so you didn't have to learn a new program. If you already knew how to use InDesign, you could lay it out the same way and then create something different. And there's a web app that you use to publish your issue to the Apple Newsstand app. And since it's all made in InDesign, it's really easy for us to create an interactive PDF version for desktop users. For inspiration, Symbolia looks to a long line of innovative small press publishers. So besides looking at all different kinds of comics journalism, we also spend a lot of time looking at other people that have started publications and done different stuff with them. The library at the college that I work for has a really great collection of independent magazines, but my favorite magazine to look up to is Raw. the comics anthology that was produced by Francoise Muley and Art Spiegelman in the 80s. For those of you that don't know, Muley and Spiegelman printed it and bound it themselves in their loft. And Raw included elements to allow the reader to further engage and interact with their magazine, like trading cards and chewing gum and sound clips on discs, long before the like interactive publishing as we know it now was like even thinking about existing. And so they were really pushing publishing in the 80s, and that makes me ask myself, how can we push publishing now? And I want to keep doing different stuff, even if it's something that doesn't turn out to be a long-term kind of media making, like sound clips on discs. It's really awesome. So that's Symbolia. You can still read our preview issue for free and check out the rest of the magazine, and then check out the rest of the issues of the magazine as a PDF or on the iPad by going to these links. And then we have, you can talk to us on Twitter, and then you can also talk to me on Twitter. Mostly I post things about how great burritos are, leftover burritos and current burritos. So I don't know if did you do questions at the very end or right now?
Let's do Q&A now.
Okay.
Because I think that the next question is generally about Symbolia. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
You said that each issue has a theme. How do you pick the theme, and how does it tie together?
The first themes we have an open pitch list on our website. Anyone can pitch a story to us. And so when we look at that, when we first started, we were looking to that list to see like what kinds of stories fit together, and like how can we craft a theme around like what we have, and then so our first theme was how we survive, and it was just about like different kinds of survival. So they're pretty loose. And then lately we have a lot of stuff in that list that we kind of picked the obvious ones for things that go together, and so now we're kind of having more directed calls for pitches around things that we just think will be fun to do. So our last issue was true crime, so we just wanted like true crime. We wanted to see like what kinds of stories we would get from people about true crime, and one of them was about how juggalos have been classified as a gang by the FBI, and how that's not really, they're not a gang, and so it's not very nice to do that to them because they just like some different music and have, like, they shouldn't be discriminated against for like having different interests. But so that, like, that one was, yeah. So yeah, our next one is our next theme is the confessional. So we're going to be publishing memoir, which I'm really excited about because a lot of my comics that I've published are autobiographical, and so I'm really interested. I really like memoir, and so I'm really excited to be publishing a memoir issue.
So it's meant to be more of like a non-fiction. It's kind of like a This American Life rather than Breaking News.
Yeah. Because we release our issues every other month, we aren't very good at like jumping on the breaking news. So we try to publish stories that are timeless but not timely.
I've about a million questions.
Okay.
So I'll try and limit them. One of the things I find most visually appealing about Symbolia is the use of color. Are all your stories color? Is that something that you make a conscious effort to incorporate?
We do try to have all of our stories be in color, partly because the color looks so cool on a backlit screen. You get just like these really vibrant, like, you just have like a really wide range of color because of the luminosity, and so we do try to have most of our stories be in color, but we have a few that have been in black and white as well.
Anyone else before? Yeah, go ahead. No.
How do you do your marketing? How do you get the word out about it? Do you just go traditional Facebook and Twitter,
I can answer part of that question. My co-founder Erin is really the wizard with the marketing, but I think we use like mostly Facebook and Twitter and Tumblr, but and then I think we also like submit our like press releases to other news organizations. So that's what we did when we launched, and we got a lot of coverage then. And then we've had coverage from different like special interest publications since then, based around like what our issues were. But don't know a lot more about what goes on behind the screen.
So you mentioned these articles that you do about bands, and that you include music clips in the journal. So I'm just curious how you deal with copyrights.
Yeah, the clips that we've published, we've gotten express permission from the artists before publishing them. So for the ICP story, they were not comfortable with us including an entire song in the magazine, so we had an external link to a YouTube video, which they were all right with, but they also allowed us to use a couple clips from some of their songs and play those as well. And then the article that we did in the preview issue about Amanaz, they didn't care. They were like, just put them all in there and just link back to us. And we were like, all right. But that's a hairy
Have you come
issue.
to any other issues with copyright?
I don't think so. We've been very careful about how we've been very careful to get permission for anything that we're publishing that is copyrighted.
Do people pitch? You said that people pitch ideas of themes. Right?
They pitch stories.
They pitch stories.
Mm-hmm.
Do people pitch a story to you and then you bring in an artist to illustrate it, or are people pitching things to you where they're going to write and illustrate it themselves, or
Both.
Yeah.
We've had some contributors that both illustrate and report their entire story. And then we have some other stories that are co-produced. Kat worked on a story with three journalists. So she did all of the illustrated components, and they did all of the reporting and interactive. So it depends on what the person is comfortable with.
what's that experience like when you're an artist working with someone who's writing the story?
I think Kat should answer that one.
Okay. When I worked with the journalists that Joyce mentioned, it was pretty easy to work with them. They were a good group, and they provided the story that I illustrated took place in Mexico, and they had been down there. They interviewed all the people that were in the story. They had sound bites. They had photographs of the areas that the boy talks about, which I won't show you the photographs, but I'll show you the pages, a couple of them. So that was great, because it would have been really difficult if they'd come back from Mexico and hadn't taken any pictures, and I would have had to make up what a poor rural town in Mexico looks like, because I don't have any experience visually with that. So they were really good. They worked up what they wanted the word bubbles to have and everything. I might have made a couple suggestions just to make it flow a little bit better, but really I just had to focus on the art, which was really great, because sometimes a writer can not be used to the visual way to tell a story, and you kind of have to help the writer along a bit. But working with Symbolia was pretty smooth. It was really smooth, actually.
Good. Good job. Okay.
I have another question. It seems like on the web, there's just so much coming at us in terms of things to read and things to look at.
So
that
true.
One of the ways that a certain story or a certain thing will get traction is by being linked in social media or through other websites and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to link Symbolia stories outside of the app or outside of the issue?
We have the method that we have for that is we have for each story we'll write like a synopsis and have a preview page, and that's what gets shared. And then to read the rest of the story, that person would have to buy the issue. Mm-hmm.
When you are putting together the writers and the artists, how do you do that?
It depends on the kind of story. Aaron and I are we're such a good team because we have very different skill sets. And Erin knows because she comes from the journalism community, like she knows a lot of journalists and she knows like how they work and what it's like to work with them and how they write. And I know a lot of cartoonists, and so it gives us the opportunity to look, like Erin can hand me like a chunk of a story and I can look at it and be like, you should call this person, this person, this person and see who's available to do it.
Do they always go smoothly?
Ours have. I think.
It's like matchmaking, and it seems like it could.
We've had some people that have had to bail, but they've done it at a respectful time in the process where we could get someone else hooked up. It's gone really well. The people that we've worked with have all been really awesome and really professional and have worked together and communicated really well.
So you once you put them together, do you sort of back off and just wait for everything to come in, or are you?
We have like a pretty. We're very involved in the editing process. That's a way that we're more like a traditional news publication. There's a lot of, we get a thumbnail stage and do, Erin does like a lot of like broad edits, and then I'll do visual edits of like whether or not like panel to panel things are reading the way they are trying to make them read, or whether like we have too many talking heads and maybe we need to show some more stuff. And then I get uninvolved around that time, and Erin continues to do like story like writing, editing. So yeah, because there's like fact checking that happens, and after we get roughs in, we do like the first round of fact checking. Are you representing this person or this place in a way that is true to the reporting? And then the finals get like a cursory fact check. We will have caught most of the stuff in the beginning, but like we'll do fact check based on like colors and how like the final inking went down, and like just making sure that it meets journalistic standards in terms of truth.
That's more than most newspapers do.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never worked on another such a strict journalism project. But Erin is very professional about like the reporting aspect of it, all of it. But she knows a lot more about the reporting aspect of it because she's worked in publishing for a lot of years.
Anybody else? I have one last question if I can. Do you ever think that it would be published as in print in any form, book, maybe of invested stories?
I've thought about that a lot, and I do. When we make our PDF version, we make an interactive PDF for people that are reading Symbolia on their computers, and we also make a version of the PDF that's completely flat. That would be suitable for print, but we use it for publishing to the Kindle Fire because the Kindle Fire, the method that we publish through can't do the interactive part. So I do have versions that would be suitable for print of most of our issues. The real hurdle to print for us is the cost. It would have to be full color. They're large enough that they would have to be perfect bound, and that's very, when you're paying up front for all the copies of the book, like, as someone that has published minis, like, you're like, all right, here's all my money, hope that I sell at least some of these. And yeah, so I don't know is the answer to that question. If there was a demand for it, then we would probably consider it. But at the moment, I think the digital spaces has been good for us.
Wouldn't you also have some sort of weird issue with like the interactive stuff? You talk about like having sound clips and things, and then like what happens when you come to that page and you get to something?
Well, it wouldn't be there, and a lot of some of our stories are pitched to us in these ways that are really exciting for interactive, and it's really fun to plan the interactive, and like the structure of the story kind of depends on the digital space, and then when it's translated to this flat PDF for Kindle Fire, I'm like, this is just not really how this was intended to be published. And there's like there can be like an issue of some things being lost in translation in that, when changing like that.
Questions? Thank you so much,
Awesome.
Joyce.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so the first thing I should say is the first step in my process of illustrating something is very cryptic to anyone who is not me. Because I know what this is, but it's really hard for anyone else to decipher this business here or anything else. So the first step is always just thumbnailing, and also I work entirely digitally from sketch to color to finish. So usually when I'm done with a thumbnail or a sketch or a rough sketch, I delete it. So the samples that I have are a couple pages from the Symbolia story that I did, and then a couple pages from a different story that I did that involves superheroes. So that's not going to be as on topic, but it shows my process really well because I still have some of the early sketches. Do I push the arrow button?
Yeah.
Okay. So once I have a tight sketch, I do the lines, and I always put in the words and any type that I'm going to have on the page first, because otherwise I'll kind of forget about it, and I won't leave a good place for it, or I'll forget how much space one sentence can take up on a page. So I always have that in first so that I know to make room for it. So with this story, it's about a little boy whose father is deported to Mexico. The boy is an American citizen, but he chooses to go with his father and leave his mother and sister in America because he wants to be with his father. So in this story, it's the one that I had a lot of really good reference photography for, which is how I know what his roof looks like that he spent a lot of time on, and I know what his family looked like together in a group. And I was able to use the photos. There were lots of different photos of him, so I was able to just kind of get used to drawing him, and then I could draw him as a character several times through. And then all the spaces that he's in is pretty much from reference photography, like it's all real places. And I do tones. Pretty simple. I just figure out where the light's going to be, and then when I do that, I can figure out what the colors are going to be like. I can add a texture if I want to, which I really like to do. With this one, I wanted to use pretty much two colors, blue and yellowish orange. Just blue because sad and it's blue. Yeah. So with this one, this isn't the sketch page, but it was a really good page to show the kind of interactivity that Symbolia has, because these are the lines for the page, and then this is the first thing that you see before you click on anything, then there's a symbol for the click. And when you click, the other panels come in. And this one has sound spots for sound bites, for segments of the interview. It shows these different specific locations that his sister, who's visiting him, is talking to him about. Like the fact that there are chickens in the kitchen. They don't have indoor. I don't know if they don't have indoor plumbing, but they do all their bathing outside in this sink. Things like that. Details about the food. And then that's just another process in the color step. So another cool thing, which I can't show in a PowerPoint, but Symbolia also does, I don't know how often, but they do animated GIF covers, which I think is really cool, because I got to do the one for this one, and it's Lolo, the little boy, on his roof, and the clothes on the clothesline are waving, which is super fun to animate.
It looks really rad.
I really like to animate things. So the next story that I have is about a giant fucking robot head. And so this is basically the very first drawing that I did of it, which changes a lot. This is a robot head falling. These are buildings, lines. I mean, it's hard to tell exactly what everything is, but this is another go that I took. I added a lot more panels. I added other people in the city. This character is in a crowd of people. She's not just standing on a deserted street, so it's like I have to show multiple people here. So I added panels, and then I look at reference photography. And I don't work directly from any one photograph, tracing it, but I look at a whole bunch of other ones and just try and pull as much inspiration from different places as I can. And I couldn't find people running from above, so I looked at people running from the front and just kind of switched them. And then I did lines after all the research, which is just the longest step, is the sketching and everything. And then tones, again, just so I know, the darker things are closer, figure all that out. Sometimes I add the texture just to make sure. Depending on the texture, it can change a lot in the colors, and it can change a lot in the tones. Like the lighter tones can sometimes just disappear if you have a really a dark texture. And then colors, and then that would be like the final page. And then I have another one that's just super rough, getting things down. Tighter, and then from the tighter sketches where I work directly to get the inks, and then tones and texture and final page. So those are that's a pretty good indication of my process and everything. I think I covered everything. Yeah. That's pretty much it. If I'm doing my own story, if I'm creating my own dialogue or my own story, I always do that after I start drawing it. I figure out what's kind of going to happen, and then I actually write it as I'm drawing it, because if I don't see it, I can't figure out how people are going to talk. So that's something I don't know how many other people do that. It might be kind of unique. But that's just kind of how I have to write things, by drawing them and then figuring out what's going on. The end. I think that's everything.
Does anybody have any questions for Pat?
When you're drawing perspective, I noticed there's some creative, some buildings or buildings or robots that was calling down. How do you think about perspective with reference and what,
Actually, how do I full screen this again? I should full screen this again. No,
Go
that's not right.
to play slideshow.
Yeah, sorry. All right, so the buildings, the way that I did that is I did look at a lot of fisheye lens photographs, because they do that warped perspective that can be really cool if it's something, you know, dramatic is going on, or if you're looking. And I have to tell you, Google image looking at a bunch of fisheye buildings, like down a low angle looking up, you get vertigo just from like scrolling through all the images, because they're these warped perspectives. You look like you're just like looking straight up, and you get a little dizzy. With this one, what I did is I put down perspective lines as they would be normally, and then I just kind of transformed them to warp them out. That was helpful. Because I do have a difficult time with structures and buildings, so that's something that I did just to kind of make it easier for me to figure out how everything would be. And again, the reference photography was really useful for this specific shot with the buildings and the way that they curved. Yeah.
So are you working in Photoshop or what's up?
Yeah.
Photoshop?
It's all Photoshop. I have a little laptop and an Intuos tablet that I work with. And, you know, until I came to college, I was completely traditional. Like, I'd never used a tablet before, which is why I really like to try and bring in a lot of the traditional kind of elements. One of the things that I do with my brushes is in Photoshop, you can turn on a scatter. And if you have like a sponge brush and you turn up a scatter pretty low, you get that kind of jaggediness that you would get, you know, dragging a pen across a grainy piece of paper, which I really like. And you can turn the scatter up and the opacity down and just kind of make a watercolor effect. Yeah.
As an artist myself, I really haven't worked with writers very much. That's something I've always sort of wanted to, because I feel that, like, looking at my own art, I tend towards certain kinds of stories, and I tend towards certain visual decisions when I'm totally plowing forward with my own choices. Do you find working with a writer, you know, do you feel that changes how you work, or do you feel that you're making different kind of choices stylistically, or how does it change your process to work with someone else?
It depends a lot on the writer. I've worked with a writer before who had everything laid out that he wanted it, down to the panels, the way he wanted the panels arranged on the page, and that was really interesting because his panel layouts, like he would do a long skinny panel in the middle of the page, which is something that I would never think to do myself or do on my own, but it was also interesting to kind of change perspectives and try drawing in a way that it wouldn't have occurred to me to draw. Other writers let you kind of figure out a lot of the visuals on your own, which is how I like to work, because I do know a lot about visuals and it makes sense to kind of leave it up to me. But if the writer knows what they're doing, then it can also be really neat to kind of explore their mindscape and the way that they're seeing the story.
But it doesn't really stylistically change what you're doing necessarily. It might depend on the story, or
no. I found that my style is pretty consistent, even if I'm doing something like this that involves superpowers, which you didn't really get in these 2 pages, but there are superpowers, trust me. Or there's another series that I drew about. It was more fantasy. It was a couple of little kids. One of them had a pair of wings, the other one was a witch, and so that was a lot more kind of like an all-ages fantasy book, and yet the styles were still pretty similar, which I'm proud of, because I worked a really long time to try and, you know, get a style that was my own.
Well, what about working with editors? Like, do you think they make good edits?
I have not really worked with any editors. I worked on an anthology for a ladies' night that I go to at Graham Crackers Comics. We did an anthology of just short stories that some of the ladies in the group wanted to do. And with that one, I had an editor, but she really didn't have any. Like she didn't have any notes for me. I wasn't having trouble visualizing it. And then the other comics that I've published have all been, I draw the comic and then I give the comic to, I'm published by Yeti Press. I have bookmarks for them here. I think. Well, anyway, they might be in my bag. But Yeti Press is a micro publisher, and they publish a lot of different kinds of stories. And with them, I pretty much just give them the comic that I did, and then they'll usually just publish it as is. They don't edit it. So I would like to work with an editor, because I'm sure there are things that I'm just completely missing. It would be nice to know, but I haven't really had that experience yet.
So your piece for Symbolia didn't go through the process?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you had a lot of... I don't know if there were a lot of changes requested for your work.
Yeah,
I don't think there were any, like, visual...
I always send, if I am working with other people or for other people, I always send my stages as I go, like the roughs, the rough sketches, so that ahead of time they do know what it's going to look like. I'm not going to finish a page without them ever seeing it and not have any idea what it's going to look like. So maybe that's why I haven't ever had a really hideous edit, because along the process I've been keeping the other people involved in on it.
But your roughs are, like you said, your roughs are so rough that how would anybody know how to interpret?
Well, there's the thumbnails, and then there's the rough. Yeah, the thumbnails. Sometimes I try and show someone the thumbnail, and I was like, well, you can't see it, but this is a person, and then this is another person. That's a car and a building. It'll be 3 lines. But I know what I know what it is, but that's why it's a thumbnail. It's just for layout purposes and for my own thought process. It's really not for anyone else. So I would do a rougher sketch.
I have a question for you. Kat and I went to college together, and I've always admired Kat's work a great deal. And I was wondering, do you feel like your style has changed a lot over the past, 5 years?
It's gotten better. I've just gotten better at anatomy, and I started drawing comics 3 years ago, and in that time I've changed so much for the better. It's just been a process of learning. I know that I'm influenced a lot by many other artists, which sometimes does kind of change how I go about things. There are some things that I have made more of an effort to include, like backgrounds, drawing other people other than the main characters, just to kind of give a sense of a sense of where characters are. Basic stuff, but still things that I had to figure out that I wasn't doing in the beginning.
You do your own coloring too. That's not the case entirely with all of the things in Symbolia, or is it?
We only had one story. We had one story that we hired a colorist for, because the artist ran out of time.
But most of the time, the illustrators do their own colorations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What you said you started drawing comics 3 years ago, and I also like Joyce answers this question. I mean, what got you into it? What was the thing what were the stories that you wanted to tell that galvanized you into jumping into this field?
Well, it was a combination of things. I've been a fan of comics, more hardcore, since high school. Mostly webcomics and manga, things that I could kind of get for free because I couldn't afford American comics. They were too expensive. Now I can, and I'm reading a lot more. But in the beginning, it was a lot of webcomics, and I was just inspired majorly by the the kind like professional grade art that people put up for free online and seem to update very regularly. It just impressed me so much that it kind of made me realize that I could do this. Also, I really love animation, which is another huge thing that contributed to me wanting to draw comics, because I really wanted to make my own feature-length animated movies, but I can't by myself. But I can make an entire comic book, and that was kind of my outlet for the stories that I wanted to tell, like the visuals that I wanted to show.
Yeah. I've always been, I've been reading comics since I learned to read, and I've been drawing comics in some format for just about as long. And I just really love sequential art as a method of storytelling. Like, I love the way you can, the kinds of stories you can tell in the gutter between panels, and like the kinds of information you can give with just like a sequence of panels. And yeah, I just can't remember a time when I didn't want to tell stories through sequential art or comics. It's not a very good answer, but that's what I got.
I have one last question. You mentioned that you feel like you're influenced by other artists. I'm just curious who those artists might be.
Oh God. So many. Like I said, animated movies, and even animated movies, just dozens of people. Like, let me think. I'm influenced a lot by classic children's book artists like Kai Nielsen or Edmund Duloc or Arthur Rackham. A huge influence is probably Hayao Miyazaki's movies like Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro. Those movies, just the kinds of stories that he told and the way that he told them just made so much sense to me. And then there's another studio, I'm not sure how to say it. They write at Studio 6 Degrees or something like that, but they did Summer Wars, and like the 6th One Piece movie. But the style is detailed backgrounds, and then the animation style is very flat, but there's so much movement and life in the animation. It kind of makes me want to draw and show that kind of movement in comics. And then there are a bunch of comic artists like Cory Walker, Mike Mignola, webcomic artists, Kate Beaton, Dershing. See, I read these names, but I can't pronounce them. But gosh, it's just so much influence from just like every visual thing that I see that I like. It's hard to say exactly.
Anybody else? Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much.